Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's Super Bowl week. Yes, I know. It really is. Trust me. I know the hype's not there. It doesn't seem like it, at least. Maybe I'm just not paying attention, but you're going to have to trust me on this one, John, and everyone listening. Super Bowl week is here, and what I think is, we're gonna have a pretty good matchup this week, I think. The Eagles, we've talked about the Eagles all year as being the, from start to finish, the best team in the league. Then, of course, the Chiefs are the Chiefs. So should be exciting, should be fun. But, John, that's not where we're going to start today. We're going to start in, your favorite league, the NBA. Yes, that's right, John, because if you were sleeping or at least comatose for most of the afternoon yesterday, that's about the only way you'd probably not hear about this. But Kyrie Irving has been traded to the Dallas Mavericks. This is coming off the heels of the trade request that was made public just recently. Obviously, Kyrie's been a certain level of frustration to deal with whatever team handles him, and there's been trade requests in the past, but this one obviously had some legs, and it very, very quickly came to fruition. So Kyrie Irving, no longer a Brooklyn Net. He is now a Dallas Maverick. And John, I'll hand it over to you, and you tell me who won, who lost, and what do you make of this deal?
Well, I thought the Lakers were going to really be aggressive in going after Kyrie Irving because LeBron James intimated that at the end of last week when it became public that Kyrie Irving wanted to be traded. But I'm pretty convinced that Joe Tsai, the owner of the Brooklyn Nets, said anywhere but the Lakers. I'm not going to make Kyrie Irving happy. I'm not going to maybe put them over the top and lead them to another championship. So send them somewhere else. And Dallas put together a decent package, not a great package, but considering it's a distressed asset who's going to be a free agent at the end of the year, who is, to put it mildly, a lightning rod, right? I mean, this guy, you may get a good month out of him, and then he goes off the reservation, and he sits out games, and he's not the most durable guy either. Is he going to be there for the playoffs? There's a lot of ifs with Kyrie Irving. But in return, Brooklyn gets Spencer Dinwiddie, who's a nice player who played in Brooklyn for 5 years, a few years back, and is a solid player. Dorian Finney-Smith, who's a nice piece as well, some draft picks. They didn't give as much back as the talent would make you think so for Kyrie Irving. But again, distressed asset. The trade deadline is on Thursday, and he's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. And Brooklyn had talked to him about a contract extension, and it just didn't work out because there were some parameters in there that Kyrie was not going to be adherent to. So, yeah, it kind of was surprising to happen that quickly. But again, the trade deadline is Thursday, which is incredibly early. I mean, it's still 2 months before the end of the regular season. So you're going to see some action take place this week. Who knows? Maybe Kevin Durant gets moved and Brooklyn says, let's just blow this whole thing up and start fresh, get as many draft picks and players we can get back and go from there, because there's another free agent class year to year to year to year. So you can add players at that point. Phoenix could get involved. The Lakers may be in play to add someone, not Kevin Durant, but someone else. But I mean, there's Kyrie Irving now on his 14th. It's going to be fascinating to watch Kyrie Irving with Luka Doncic. I think they're the two most skilled offensive players in the league. Not necessarily the best players in the league, but skilled offensive players. There's going to be games, Ian, when they mesh so beautifully together, it's going to be breathtaking to watch. There may be other games where it's going to be frustrating to watch, and you could see both of those guys maybe bickering at each other going back to the huddle. So it's going to be fascinating to watch the next 2 months.
Yeah, and that was something I was going to ask you too. What's the dynamic going to be between those two? Because you presumably have two alpha superstars, guys that, when the game's on the line, give me the ball, or, let me do what I do type of thing. And look, this could be a home run for Dallas, because obviously they haven't had this type of talent to complement Luka since he's been in the league. But you said it before, he's a lightning rod. So at any given moment, this could blow up in their face. And, when you think about it, if you're Dallas, you're like, okay, it's February. It's almost the middle of February. We need 5 months at best, 4 months of good Kyrie. And, if it pays off, it could potentially pay off in an NBA title. If not, well, like you said, you can say goodbye to him in the offseason and not be too upset with what you gave up and kind of move on and not be crippled. So obviously the risk in this is what's going to happen with Dallas. Are they going to take this and run with it, or is this going to blow up in their face? Because, John, look, Brooklyn for a little while was starting to play well, and all of a sudden they were right in the mix and at the top of the Eastern Conference, and you're like, okay, maybe maybe they have kind of, put some of these things in the past. Now it's, to your point, this could be a team that could decide to move on from Kevin Durant and just blow it all up, or they could be very active at the deadline too to try to replenish some of what Kyrie brought to the table when he was out there. So, where does this go? Go ahead.
They were playing really well. They were playing really well when Durant got hurt about a month ago. They were right on the heels of the Celtics and Milwaukee Bucks for the best record in the Eastern Conference. They've slid back because Durant's out. He's that good. He's supposed to be back within a couple of weeks. He's not the most durable guy either. So I also think, too, Ian, that there's so many teams in the Western Conference that look at it and say the Western Conference is completely wide open. Golden State playing around 500, and Steph Curry's probably going to miss the next month. Denver's the best team in the West. I picked them to win the championship. I still am very high on them. But I don't think any team in the West really fears the Denver Nuggets. Maybe Denver's going to be in play also at the trade deadline to add a piece to help out Nikola Jokic. I think every team out West that's, right there is going to say, geez, if we can add one more player here, we can make a run. Dallas was not going to be a title contender with Luka Doncic and a bunch of other guys. It resembled so much what Cleveland was with LeBron in his first 7 years, where they were always tough to beat. They would win a series or two, but it was one great player playing with a lot of role players, and that's not enough to win in the NBA. So you add Kyrie Irving. I think it's a big swing. It could be a big swing and a miss. It could be a big swing and a home run. It's going to be really interesting to watch what happens.
Yeah, and look, I mean, if you're Dallas, you're in a position to make one of these big swings, because if you do miss, it's not like you were, obviously the Celtics would never do it, but if they were in a position like the Celtics, where obviously you've been in first place for a while, you know who you are, you're obviously a title contender, but you decide to really shake things up and potentially risk what you already have by bringing in a guy like Kyrie Irving. Now, Dallas, to your point, they weren't going to contend. They were going to have a nice team, but they weren't going to contend with what they had. So, excuse me, if they go out there, they swing and they miss, well, what's the difference from where they would have landed? And, of course, if they hit the ball or hit it out of the park, so to speak, I know we're mixing baseball analogies with basketball talk, but, you're just going to have to bear with us here. I'm about to start coughing my head out right now, so I'm going to hand the mic over to you in just a moment, John. But yeah, if they hit it right, all of a sudden you have a team that could potentially be the best in the West, and all of a sudden your expectations change.
Oh, without question. Where they were was probably a team that could win one, maybe two rounds if you get the right combination and if you get the right team that you play in those rounds, right?
Yep.
Other than that, I can't see them winning 3 rounds, getting to the finals. And look, if Dallas is really good, and Luka's, I think, a leading MVP contender. Heck, they're 0-7 in games he's missed this year. So it shows you what lack of talent they have there. So he needed a number 2 guy. And I think Kyrie's pretty comfortable being the number 2 guy. He wanted to be the number 1 guy when he came to Boston, and he's just not equipped for that. Not that his talent isn't, equipped for that, but it's just his mindset. He's not the lead guy. He's best served as number 2 guy, which, makes you question why he just didn't embrace LeBron more in Cleveland. That's the perfect situation. You've got the ultimate leader and then a great Robin, right?
Yeah, but he was also a lot younger then too. So like your ego is going to take over any sort of logic or sound thinking in that situation.
And he's never happy. He wasn't happy there. Then he wasn't happy being the leader in Boston. It's just one of those guys.
Not just that, it's LeBron too. So, like, I think it's a little bit easier to take a backseat to Kevin Durant when you're a little bit older than it is to take a backseat to LeBron James when you're younger and kind of still fresh off being the number 1 pick. So,
right. And by the way, the 3 years before LeBron showed up in Cleveland, the Cavaliers had the worst record in basketball with Kyrie Irving. So, he doesn't necessarily impact winning all that much. I mean, we could see what happened in Brooklyn. As soon as Durant went out, they played sub 500 basketball. He's marvelous. I've told you before, he's one of my favorite players to watch. If I could show up to a playground as any player in the NBA, it'd be Kyrie Irving, 6'2", so you're not going to stand out on a playground. You may not be the first pick, and then all of a sudden when the game starts, you're like, holy cow, who's this guy? Because his skill set is incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's we'll see what happens. Now, Mark Cuban is a guy that thinks outside the box, so this is probably the right owner, and maybe Mark Cuban can strike up a relationship with him. They're both kind of iconoclasts. Maybe he'll enjoy playing in Dallas and not necessarily being the biggest star on the team. But
Yeah.
look, all eyes will be on Dallas, certainly, right, for the next 2 months, because you got the leading MVP candidate in Luka and now Kyrie Irving. So they're going to be one of the most talked about teams in the league for the next 2 months and then into the playoffs.
Your gut feeling, is this going to work?
I think it will. I think it will, because I think Luka's such an incredible talent, and he's a guy who I think makes guys around him better. He got to the conference finals last year and was fairly competitive. He lost in 5 games to Golden State with just a bunch of guys. I think he can impact players so much that at the end of games, it doesn't necessarily have to be Luka making the big shot. I think he could set Kyrie up. They're both, I hate using the term basketball geniuses, but you get my point.
Yeah.
Very high IQ on the basketball court. Kyrie's got all of that. There's no questions. His talent, intellect for the game, all of that stuff is off the charts, as it is with Luka. I mean, they may be challenged on the defensive end, but it's an offensive league for sure. But I think it certainly will work for a while. The key here is going to be Jason Kidd, the head coach. Now, the problem with Kyrie is he doesn't respect coaches. He didn't respect Steve Nash, who's a Hall of Famer. Is he going to really respect Jason Kidd, who's also a Hall of Famer? You can have a discussion on whether...
If you think about it, too, obviously coming from the same era, and I was actually just going to bring up, Kevin Nash. I'm thinking WWF. Oh, my God. Steve Nash and Dirk. I mean, very... Yep. If you think about it, a guy, obviously Nash won 2 MVPs, superiorly talented, certainly for his era. And then you have Dirk Nowitzki, who is arguably at any given point in the conversation as being one of the top 3 players in the league at his peak.
Yeah, he won an MVP, won a title. Yeah, he was a tough matchup for sure. And he's kind of involved with the Mavericks. But again, it's tough to really predict what Kyrie's going to do. I don't think Kyrie knows what he's going to do.
No, of course not.
Blow things up. So he's not the kind of guy where you sit down and say, look, can you just be focused for the next few months? We've got something important here, and then we'll deal with the contract after that. He seems to be the guy that's the perfect candidate for those 1-year deals, right? Because do you want to really commit 4 years, $200 million to him? I know I wouldn't.
And I don't know if he wants to commit 4 years to anywhere. So, I mean, it could be beneficial to him as well. But, then you're just getting into the mess of trying to, basically bank on yourself and all that. But, you're right. It's going to be fascinating storyline basketball to watch, certainly fascinating basketball. And we'll see if this kind of puts the Mavs up and over to the top. So, all right. We didn't get a chance to last week because it really kind of got lost in the mix with Tom Brady's retirement and obviously the championship games and all that. But the drama with Sean Payton was really no drama at all because, he's going to be the coach of the Denver Broncos, a team that he was most really legitimately connected to. I know, the Dolphins and people have talked. We've talked about Los Angeles, the Chargers, all that stuff, but the reports had been really since this ramped up was, the Broncos were interested. And the question was, John, and this is something where, I certainly question this, and it seems to have, or we have seemed to have been given Sean Payton's answer, and that is, can you fix Russell Wilson? And if you're Sean Payton, you have to believe that you can fix Russell Wilson, because you're not going to commit to the Denver Broncos being saddled with Russell Wilson for the next 5 years. So that's the biggest takeaway I have from this, because if you believe you can fix Russell Wilson, all of a sudden the situation doesn't seem so bad. Decent defense last year, some talent on the offense. If you can get the most out of Russ, then you know what? You're in okay shape. I'm not going to say you're going to compete for any division, but you may be able to sneak into the playoffs and certainly have a far more successful season than you did a year ago. So were you shocked Sean Payton ultimately went to Denver?
No, not really. I think they could throw the most money at him, right? They have new ownership, which has a net worth of $75 billion. Yeah, so they were like, here's 5 years, $100 million. It'll be the second highest paid coach in football. That's a lot of money to say no to. And he'll pretty much have his say there in constructing the roster. No, George Patton or Payton, I don't know the right way to pronounce his name. I prefer to call him George Patton. We'll just call him the general. Is the general manager there, but I'm sure Sean Payton is going to be the guy that makes most of the major decisions. Yeah, and let's not forget, coaches have massive egos too, especially Sean Payton. I mean, he has a massive ego, so he's probably like, sure, I can go in and fix Russell Wilson. Why not? I can handle that. And I think, we didn't discuss this because of the Brady retirement. Maybe they were somewhat connected because we heard all the rumors that Brady wanted to play for Payton in Miami. And I think once Payton went to Denver, Brady's like, well, I'm not going to Denver. They got Russell Wilson. They can't get rid of him. I always thought a decent place would have been New Orleans. Wouldn't that have made some sense for Brady and Payton? Payton go back to New Orleans after a year?
I don't know. New Orleans
far from Florida, right? I mean,
but they're not a team I don't believe right now that is on the cusp of contending. I mean, I think they got old very quickly. The strength of their team last year, the defense was nothing but mediocre this year, and I never really liked that as an option. And maybe the choice to go to Denver. Now, again, apparently Denver was looking at other coaches as well, so maybe Sean Payton wasn't there for which is kind of strange. I don't believe that he wasn't their first choice, but they certainly had options. Maybe they did talk about it, and I'm saying Payton and Brady, and maybe Payton realized that Brady was going to call it a career because, excuse me, I don't think Brady woke up yet or the other morning and just said, screw it, I'm going to retire. I think obviously he had been thinking about it since the season ended. And probably got his ducks in a row, so to speak, before posting the video. And maybe one of those ducks was to talk to Sean Payton. Not that there was any, one had to go or the other type of situation where they would only play with each other or he would only play with Sean Payton. I think if there was an option to do so, I think he would have explored it because why not? But ultimately, I think I think it's more coincidence than anything. If not, maybe Payton just made the decision based on knowing Brady was going to be gone for good and said, okay, well, I'll go get a franchise or at least a guy who I think is going to be a franchise quarterback, at least for the next couple of years in Denver. And look, if I had to choose, even if I do believe that Russell Wilson is serviceable at best, I'm still taking Denver over Arizona.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Better roster right on defense. Arizona really got old. They got a bunch of free agents.
Better roster, better ownership.
Yeah. Yeah, better ownership. They haven't even filled the coaching position as of today, right? Which is kind of crazy where a month after the regular season ended, we're a week away from the Super Bowl and the Colts and Cardinals don't have their head coaches. Like that's kind of strange, right? I mean, and it doesn't appear that they're interviewing any of the candidates from Kansas City or Philadelphia. So, like, what exactly are they waiting for? It could be that, Brian Flores is going to end up being the head coach in Arizona because the connection with the general manager, Monty Austinfort, who was with the Patriots when Flores was here. So that could be something. In Indianapolis, I'm still convinced they're going to hire Jeff Saturday. That's what the owner wants. Yeah. Everybody else in the organization is trying to talk, Jim Irsay out of that. But he's the guy who writes the check. So maybe Saturday comes back as head coach of the Colts. But both of those organizations don't even have a head coach right now.
Well, that's what it seems like where it's trending, at least for Indianapolis, because they've gone through several rounds of interviews. And one of the consistent things that keeps coming out of all of it is, well, the Colts really like Jeff Saturday. And I was like, all right, well, look, I mean, who knows? I mean, I'm not going to judge him completely on the, the half season that he did, especially considering that he came right out of the booth. But you got to feel very strongly about his growth over this offseason if you're Jim Irsay to want to commit any sort of, multi-year deal. But then again, like I said at the time, these traditional through the ranks hires don't always work out. And more often than not, I feel like they don't. So, coaching is hard in this league. And it's really, just like it is with drafting players, it's kind of a crapshoot. Because the greatest defensive coordinator could be an awful head coach. And, same with a great offensive coordinator being a terrible head coach as well. So, but if you're Sean Payton, look, like I said, he has to believe, there's no doubt in my mind, he believes that he can fix Russell Wilson. Because you're not taking that job if you, like I said, if you're going to be stuck with that guy, because no matter what you do with the rest of the roster, you're still not going to win that many games. But also the fact that, like, he didn't have to take a job, John. I mean, this is a guy who could have said, you know what, I'm going to take off one more year. The right situation hasn't risen. I wanted to go, coach Tom Brady, but he's going to retire, so I'm going to take a step back, reevaluate, and come back next year. So he didn't have to just like take this job. It's not like he was like, okay, I got to take whatever job I can get, and even though I'm in hot demand, if I don't take this job, that's it. No. I do believe he feels strongly, or he has to. If not, then money really does talk, John, because if that's the only motivation for taking the Denver job, then I think he'll regret it, because he was going to make good money no matter where he went. And he could have potentially, if he didn't believe Russell Wilson was fixable, could have found a better spot.
Which we would think would be the Chargers, right? But then again,
yeah, that's not like going to open.
Polar opposite. Yeah. Right. It's not open yet, but maybe it opens at the end of the year, next year. The problem with that is that's a notoriously cheap franchise, the Chargers. Obviously, Denver's got a ton of money. The Chargers don't. Yeah. So there's that. Look, when someone says 5 years, $100 million, I think that's enough to lure you in. He could have stayed another year doing TV, which he was making, I don't know, $7-8 million, whatever they were paying him. He's still fairly young. He's my age. I like to say that he's fairly young. But, it's not like he's 68 years old and needs to get back into coaching right away. He could have stayed another year out and then had a better position to choose from. But again, the money talks.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. And look, I mean, he loves coaching, and sometimes maybe that itch was just a little bit too much to pass up. So we'll see. And it'll make it interesting in that division. I mean, I know it's not, last year it wasn't great. I mean, the teams aren't. It's the weird thing about the AFC West. Obviously, you have the Chiefs, but the other three teams, they're all teams that you feel like should be better. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They all should be better than what they are. Like sometimes when you see like bad teams, like no, they're as bad as I expect. Yeah, that's no. I think all three of those teams, you feel like they should be better. And look, Sean Payton's going to make them better, no doubt about it. How much better really depends on how effective Russell Wilson is and what they can get out of him. Because we saw last year they had a really good defense for much of the season, and it didn't matter because they couldn't score points. So, yeah. So, anyway, speaking of scoring points, we're not going to have that problem. I think in the Super Bowl, I think we're going to have some decent scoring in this game from both sides. But according to BetMGM. Kansas City is opening at plus 105, and the Eagles at minus 125. Which, look, I mean, that sounds fair. I know obviously the Eagles have the better record, and arguably are the better team. But Kansas City's been here. They have Patrick Mahomes, and you got to figure this game is going to be as close to a pick'em as you can possibly get. Any issue with that opening line?
No, I think Philadelphia has a better roster.
Again,
sure. I'm still trying to figure out who they beat. They beat the Giants handily, which is no surprise, and then they beat San Francisco without a quarterback. So it was not that difficult a road. Obviously, Kansas City at Jacksonville, which I wouldn't call it a layup, but a fairly mediocre opponent who was playing pretty good football at the end. But the win over Cincinnati certainly was impressive. Yeah, I think the line's just about right, Ian. It's in terms of the line, it's 1.5. So if you're betting the game, just bet the money line at that point, right? If you like Kansas City, you get a little extra money if you take them. If you bet on Philadelphia, you don't have to worry about the point spread, and you lay down 125 to make 100. I would forget the actual point spread because it's only 1.5.
Yeah.
It started with Kansas City as favorite, then it flipped to Philly as favorite. I think probably a ton of money came in on the Eagles because they destroyed San Francisco, and also Philadelphia is a big betting market. Yeah. It really is, one of the biggest in the country. So I think that had some impact on that as well. So yeah, I mean, this looks like a toss-up, right? We kind of think Philadelphia has the better roster, but we think that Kansas City has the better quarterback and the more experienced, better head coach. So that may balance things off.
Yeah, and look, I mean, it's good that these numbers are where they're at, because this is no 14.5 point underdog. And look, I know people have brought up the Eagles schedule, but honestly, John, that Bengals game might have been very easily the most impressive victory for the Chiefs this year. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they lost to the Bengals earlier in the season. They lost to the Bills. People will bring up the 49ers. But if you remember at the time, the 49ers they weren't that 10 win in a row 49ers team. Jimmy Garoppolo was banged up. The team was, not quite healthy and everything like that. So I know I'm not trying to nitpick here, but it was an impressive victory, just not one that I necessarily think you should hang your hat on. And the same with the Buccaneers. I mean, look, at this point, we know that the Buccaneers just weren't really a good team, and they still put up over 30 points against this Chiefs team. So, people that point out the Eagles, well, who they played, well, who the Chiefs played? And look, you can start with their division and say their toughest opponent is, well, what? The Chargers, which is, they're mediocre. Let's face certainly last year they were. We were both high on them, but we certainly aren't going to sit here and pretend like they were anything special. The Raiders were awful. Obviously, the Broncos were bad. So it was, I think both these teams, obviously, they're good. I mean, your record's your record, and I don't care really who you play in the grand scheme of things. It's still difficult to win as many games as they have. But I don't think bringing up the Eagles' record and ignoring or bringing up the Eagles' opponents and ignoring really who Kansas City has faced all year. That's a little it's not legit in my eyes, because I think they both had fairly, I'm not going to say soft or easy schedules, but I think their schedules were pretty on par with each other. Let's put it that way.
I think they both played the AFC South, which is the worst division in the AFC, right? You had, Jacksonville won that division, so they played Jacksonville, the Texans, Tennessee,
and Jacksonville
and Indianapolis.
Was bad early in the season too. So
right. And so they didn't play, like, they didn't have to play the AFC North, where you had Cincinnati, and Baltimore was tough throughout the year, and Pittsburgh was competitive, especially late, and Cleveland was not a bad last place team, if that makes any sense. So neither team had the toughest schedule, but hey, they're here. They have the best record. They took advantage of their situations. They're both well-constructed teams. So I still don't sense the excitement yet. Maybe it'll come this week, now that everybody's going to be in Arizona, and you got Radio Row, and there'll be some excitement for it. I don't sense a huge sense of excitement here. But again, by kickoff, I think we'll be expecting, hopefully a good game.
Look, let's face it. I know people have said they're sick of them, but there's something very easy about marketing a Super Bowl that has Tom Brady in it. and look, I obviously, being a Brady fan, there might be a little bias there, but the reality of it is there was always drama surrounding Brady and whoever, whether it's the Patriots or the Buccaneers in 2020. It made for it made it very easy to market, and Brady and look, this is not a knock on Patrick Mahomes or Jalen Hurts, but you're kind of seeing a little bit of a difference in how, again, just how I think underrated Brady's megastar is. Like, I think people, obviously he's greatest quarterback ever, superstar, but people are like, you mentioned the other day that Patrick Mahomes was the face of the league, and so that's always been kind of the talk the last few years. And I always push back. And you know what I always pointed to, John, and I know this isn't any sort of official number or anything, jersey sales. Jersey sales. Remarkably, in his second season with the Buccaneers, he was still the largest selling jersey in the entire league. And that includes, like, obviously, normally those lists are, the top of those lists are obviously occupied by your stars, but basically your new stars, like stars on new teams or newly drafted players, jerseys that people just don't have yet. Presumably, over the last 20 odd years, a lot of people have gotten Tom Brady jerseys. So what this is saying is they continue to buy Tom Brady jerseys, which again tells me that despite what everyone wants to say, he was still and may very well still be the face of the league, as he's now gone as an active player. But it kind of speaks also to, well, when he's in the Super Bowl, which was quite often, it was very easy to market. And there was a lot of people that had interest, whether positively or negatively, in his success or failure. So yeah, I'm with you. I think it's going to gear up a little bit this week. Obviously, the absolute embarrassment that is the Pro Bowl it's finally over. I hope they realize very quickly it's pointless. Get rid of it. Don't even go through this whole dog and pony show. It's not even, like, John, how valuable is it the Pro Bowl now? Like, it used to mean something. Now it means absolutely nothing. And it's a joke. Tyler Huntley, John. Tyler Huntley was a Pro Bowler. Like, come on.
When he's up for the Hall of Fame, that will be, a mark that people will push that, he's a Pro Bowl quarterback. Look, I didn't watch any of it. And I also think that the league still makes a ton of money off of it. The ratings will probably be better than any college basketball games this weekend or many NBA games throughout the regular season. The NFL could literally put on, paint drying and people would watch it because it's the NFL. So yeah, it's the best players aren't there. At least the basketball, the NBA All-Star game, you're going to see LeBron and Giannis and Luka. There'll be some injuries, so some guys will miss out, but you see the best players there. Patrick Mahomes wasn't there because he's playing in the Super Bowl. Joe Burrow wasn't there because, he just lost the AFC Championship game. Josh Allen didn't show up. You didn't have, any of the huge stars. You got, Kirk Cousins, who seems to eat up the Pro Bowl. That's like the highlight of his season.
Yeah.
He and Derek Carr were like the big stars there for this weekend. So that says enough.
Yeah, and Carr's not even on, well, technically he's on the team, but he has no home right now. So that kind of tells you everything you need to know. So, but anyway, so real quick before we go, Patrick Mahomes plus 130, Jalen Hurts plus 130 for Super Bowl MVP odds. Travis Kelce is the highest non-quarterback at plus 1,600, which, that's a sneaky good grab right there, Travis Kelce, because it's very legitimate that he has a Julian Edelman type game, so to speak, or a Deion Branch like game. And that's not taking anything away from Patrick Mahomes. But as we've seen, this offense leans very heavily on Travis Kelce. And if he has 12 catches, a couple touchdowns, you can very well bet that his name is in much bigger consideration for that MVP award. And we know, John, I know the, excuse me, the league MVP, that's, a de facto quarterback award. And I know people complain about it, but let's think of it logically. The quarterback being the most important player in everything that the quarterback does, yes, it should be a quarterback award, and they should have the advantage when it comes to that. Super Bowl MVP is a little bit different because it's one game, and it can be more about a moment. It could be more emotional. Trust me. I think in any most normal circumstances, John, Malcolm Butler would have won the Super Bowl MVP, but the reality of it was you just could not give it to Tom Brady, who, we know 14 to 16, 160 some odd yards, 2 touchdowns, all that stuff. You can't not give it to him. But in most
only the fourth quarter.
Yeah, that was that's what I was saying. Just the fourth, you can that would have been a crime. I think that you could have actually arrested someone and charged them with an offense if someone did that.
Well, you would have. I'm sure.
I would have.
I flown out to Arizona.
I would have. Trust me. I would have. I would have put a I don't know if one of those
citizens arrest.
Yeah, citizens arrest, or I'll put up one of those things where people sign. I'm completely blanking on it. What am I? A petition. There we go.
Petition,
I got a petition, online petition.
Yep.
But look, you go out and you have a performance like that. So plus 1,600, John. I might be talking myself into trying to take a little bit of that action. I might have to.
That's good value. Yeah. Well, 2 of the last 4 Super Bowl MVPs have been wide receivers, right? Julian Edelman, and then last year Cooper Kupp. So those were kind of lower scoring games. It was 13-3 when Edelman won it, and it was 23-20 when Coop won it. So the quarterbacks didn't have ridiculous numbers. So let's say Kansas City wins 24-20, and Mahomes throws 2 touchdown passes, but also 2 interceptions, 246 yards, but half of them go to Kelce, and Kelce catches both touchdown passes. Maybe that's enough for him to win. But if Mahomes goes for 350, 3 touchdowns, he's going to win it. Maybe another Eagle that could be considered is A.J. Brown.
Yeah, he's at plus 1,800 right now.
Yeah, he'd be someone else that I think I'd be interested in.
And to be honest, I know, again, the people voting on this are human, so there's this aspect to it. The fact that he's Patrick Mahomes is going to give him favorable odds. Let's face it, right? So if the Eagles win, and say theoretically, Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown have identical lines together.
Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes, relatively the same amount of production. Travis Kelce and AJ Brown just have, great games, multi catches, over 100 yards, couple touchdowns, that type of thing. I think it's far more likely that you give if the Eagles win, there's a better chance that you give AJ Brown more consideration than you would Travis Kelce, despite it being very similar. So in that sense, I do think, the edge goes to Patrick Mahomes in that situation. But good value on both of them. Plus 1,600 for Travis Kelce and plus 18. That's on the FanDuel Sportsbook. I don't know what the some of the other odds are. I didn't get a chance to pull it up, but I can't imagine it's going to be too dissimilar in terms of, certainly the two non-quarterbacks with the best odds are going to be those two anywhere you get, but maybe you get some better odds somewhere else. So
and maybe if the Chiefs don't block Hassan Reddick, like San Francisco chose not to block him in the NFC Championship game, maybe he's a long shot as well.
Yeah, hey, you never know, John. You never know. So, all right, that's going to do it for us here today. We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to keep breaking down the Super Bowl each and every day that we're on here, and of course on Friday will be our mega show, and we'll give our picks and all of our predictions that will obviously naturally go all wrong, and we'll sit back with egg on our face on Monday and say, hey, better luck next year. So give us a follow on Twitter at FPC Radio Live, and of course be sure to head over to fullpresscoverage.com and fullpresshockey.com too. Hockey's geared up right now, so check it out, and we will talk to you soon.